What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the NerdBall Fantasy Football Show. I am your humble host, Pete Rogers, and I am joined by my fellow nerds. We have resident old man Clark Barnes and the working girl Jordan Smith. My friends, how are we doing today?
Doing great.
Doing great, Pete.
Well, I'll tell you, people, it took all of 1 week for me to remember how much I hate fantasy football, which I know sounds, like, why would I listen to a fantasy football podcast if one of the people on it hates fantasy football? Well, think of it as me connecting to you, the people, because at some point in this season, you will also hate fantasy football, and we can reminisce and commiserate together about how awful, truly awful fantasy football can be sometimes.
If you haven't hated fantasy football, then this is your first year in fantasy.
You've never
football,
played fantasy
congratulations
before.
on your win. Yeah.
Well, good job starting 1-0 in your very first fantasy football league, and thank you for tuning in. Yeah, so I know Clark always likes to start the show on a positive note, but when you get all excited in your home league and you're like, man, I'm gonna just be like super smart. I'm going to draft all of the kind of like trendy guys that no one, I'm going to get them at values. When my CeeDee Lamb and Mike Williams and Kyle Pitts and Allen Robinson picks all don't do shit for me.
Wow. Well, Pete, you made me feel better about my pretty mediocre week. You picked every
not great
week one disappointment. That's something.
It was devastating. Even Stephon Diggs and Kareem Hunt and Jameis Winston couldn't carry me to victory.
You should there should be some kind of like fantasy football Raz game, like the card game Raz. The goal is to get the worst possible hand that you can get, and that's the best hand. Pete, you would have won the Raz.
I would have won. That being said, there was that one lineup. I know, Jordan, you had something to say, so you go ahead, because I was going to find this lineup that someone tweeted out.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. I was going to talk about this lineup that, like,
do you have it?
No, I don't have it ready, but they Field Yates retweeted it. So they had like projected like 113, and they ended up scoring like 36 points. But so if you look at their actual roster with the players, they have good players. They just didn't score any points.
Their roster was this. This was their roster. And shout out to Dylan Jackson at dj.png on Twitter. His quarterback, Dak Prescott. We all know what happened to Dak Prescott. His RB1, Najee Harris. His RB2, Elijah Mitchell. His wide receiver 1, Allen Robinson. His wide receiver 2, T. Higgins. His tight end, Kyle Pitts. In his flex, CeeDee Lamb. And then he had the Eagles defense and Dustin Hopkins as his kicker.
Man, if you're flexing CeeDee Lamb, you're just going into the week like, how many
basking in it?
30 points am I going to beat my opponent by?
Yeah,
like
you are fully prepared for fantasy excellence, and yet, that might be the worst week one luck of the history of fantasy football. I can tell you, Dylan is agreeing with me that fantasy football is stupid, and he doesn't know why he plays it.
There's a lot of just some really poor performances all across the league. I mean, just literally everyone on that list should have performed a little bit better. Some of them got injured, but like, big deal. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but like I'm in 4 leagues. I won 2 of them. I lost 2 of them. That's like basically sums up week one, is that it's just kind of a crapshoot at times.
Yeah. Wholeheartedly.
It's a long year. It's a long year. If you want to make yourself feel better about poorly performing fantasy assets you might have drafted, just look at stats from absolute studs last year, and you'll see like, oh, Jonathan Taylor scored 8 points one game. You're like, oh, okay. All right. It's okay.
We feel good.
All right.
We feel good. Well, let's all feel good, and let's start the show. Let's get into our McLovin love of the week. I know I started us off on a negative note, but let's feel the love. Let's spread the love. And I'll start us off. And I'll share something that I loved from this week. And you know what I loved from this week, you guys? We talked about players who didn't perform in week one, players who let their fantasy team down. You know who did not let their fantasy team down? Saquon Barkley, man. It was so beautiful to see Saquon Barkley just return to not only fantasy stardom, but just like running back stardom and just doing everything on the field, catching passes, running the football. He had an insane, let me bring it up. He had a 33% target share in week 1, which is just incredible. For the record, for those keeping track at home, 4 wide receivers had a higher target share in week 1 than Saquon Barkley did. So if you drafted Saquon Barkley in like the second round, which many people were able to do, you were absolutely loving his week 1 performance. And I have to say, he looked healthy. He looked, like he was moving extremely well. Didn't have seemingly any lingering injury concerns. Brian Daboll's offense is, dare I say, exciting in New York. And so those who got Saquon Barkley, and I'm kicking myself that I did not load up on Saquon across all my leagues. You are loving week 1 right now.
Yeah, Pete, we shared the same love here. I was going to say Saquon Barkley. Like, I can't say, like, I'm not going to be tooting the horn too much to say, oh, we called it, we got it right. But we are going to toot our horn to say that we do like seeing Saquon Barkley come back and run around and do all the like insane stuff that we had seen him do, like at Penn State, and for like that year that he was really good with the Giants when they were force feeding him the ball because they didn't have any other options. But like, it's fun to see really gifted players get back on the field and show us why they're gifted. So that was just a very cool thing.
Yeah, coming back from injury is good. I mean, it's such a hyper violent game, and he didn't just come back from injury. He had some big runs that padded the stats and are awesome, and we love that. And you give him credit because he is super fast out there. But he looked really good on even his short runs. So just super quick, agile. I mean, he's cutting really hard. He looks 100% back, and probably not going to do this every week. But he is. People were concerned about his health. You don't have to be concerned about his health. If he gets injured again, it's something new. He's totally back.
Yeah.
I just want to say too that it's great that their offensive line looks good too. Like Saquon Barkley is not getting hit like almost immediately at the line of scrimmage, and who knows? Maybe he's having his Cooper Cup year where it takes like an additional year to come back from a really serious injury, and that's what we're seeing right now. Long way to go.
Yeah, but I mean, let's. I think we're safe. It's safe to say that Saquon Barkley is going to finish the RB1 and average 30 points a game.
Right.
And if you didn't draft him, you're a fool, which makes me a fool.
You heard it here first.
What did you love from this week?
I have another running back love. Just seeing Clyde Edwards-Helaire get a bunch of touchdowns.
Clark finally getting Clyde Edwards-Helaire to hit.
Yeah, and he looked good. I mean, like, not a ton of yardage, but he got a couple of touchdowns. And more importantly, it seemed like he was being used better. Last year, I was so frustrated. Why did you draft this quick little running back and then just refuse to involve him in the passing game? Well, we saw that yesterday. Like, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is getting those easy running back passes that really make, good running backs elite for fantasy. So it was just really good to see that. And then the game getting so out of hand that we got to see my boy Isaiah Pacheco put in some good work too. That was super interesting.
That's the perfect level of like fantasy football trolling, is that like Isaiah Pacheco, who everyone was super hyped on in the preseason, comes in, puts up a stat line, just like a stat line. I wonder how many people went out and were like, oh, this is it. Got to blow my fab on Isaiah Pacheco because he definitely has a role in this offense. When in reality, when you're up, 40-12, you're going to put in your backup running back. Spoiler alerts.
But he got a couple of touches before it was out of hand too. So, I mean, it's very clearly CEH McKinnon and then Pacheco sometimes to spell.
Mm-hmm.
And then apparently garbage time is Pacheco's, which is
surprising
against the Redbirds there.
I mean, the way that Pat Mahomes looks though is like he might be in garbage time a lot, Granted, to Clark's point, I do not think Arizona's a very good football team this year, but still, I don't know, maybe within their division, I haven't looked at their whole schedule, but maybe they have a few more cupcakes coming up.
For the Cardinals, yeah. It would be, I feel like they're a team that's, I don't know. If they have a bad season, part of me has to think that Cliff Kingsbury gets the axe because I know they just signed him to a massive contract, but
I'm still trying to figure out who do they love more on that team? Do they love the coach and GM combination that has failed to draft well and has not made very good signings in free agency, or the quarterback who dips on double XP weekend for Warzone? Watch out for October 30th, I think, when the new Warzone drops. You got to bench Kyler that weekend.
Kyler's not playing well that week. Unfortunately, Steve Keim has immunity after he traded David Johnson for DeAndre Hopkins. I feel like as a GM, you're untouchable if you're able to pull that trade off.
We're getting
still rough.
We're getting Hard Knocks in season of the Cardinals.
Oh
so
my
that
God.
should provide some pretty damn good content if they suck.
That is going to be some good content. Let's kind of hope for that.
We can smoothly transition into the hate. Speaking of the Houston Texans, head coach Lovie Smith admitting, kind of made a mistake. Ended up getting Burkhead more carries and snaps than we planned. That one got away from us. So hopefully Dameon Pierce will be freed week 2. It was a lot of these divisional games, it's hard to take away too much of because it's week 1 and it's divisional games where we've seen the Colts be, freaking awesome and the Texans be a dumpster fire and the Texans win, back and forth. It's like the Saints and Falcons game that we're going to talk about a little bit. Like, it's hard to take too much away from that. I mean, it's week 1 and it's a weird divisional matchup, but I hate that Dameon Pierce was throttled week 1, but I love that the coach was like, yep, F that one up. Not going to do that again.
Is it as good as Nathaniel Hackett being like, maybe we shouldn't have kicked a 64-yarder with a minute left on the clock? And Russell Wilson is our quarterback.
That was odd. You need 4 yards and you have Russell Wilson, Javonte Williams, Cortland Sutton. It feels like you go for that.
Did you guys watch the Manning cast where it's just a minute of Peyton Manning being like, call a timeout, call a timeout, call a timeout? Oh, they didn't call a timeout. Darn. And Shannon Sharp's like, what are they doing?
Can I zag on Lovie Smith and say that I actually just love that he admitted that he made a mistake and didn't bullshit us with Rex Burkhead is a veteran. He's been around. He knows how to play the game that we want to play. It's now we probably should have given our best running back some more carries. That's on me. Yeah. Accountability. Players like to see that too in the locker room.
Yeah, you like that in the NFL. Let that also be a lesson that if Lovie Smith is truly speaking truths, it's likely that Dameon Pierce is now going to get just a buttload of work in week 2. And so maybe Rex Burkhead after a strong week 1, maybe not a play or someone you should trust reliably. Who knows? But seems like his time in the sun might be over. Jordan, do you have anything you hated from this week?
My hate, I just want to I want to get it out of the way and just say it. It's not so much of a hate as more of a general rule that I just don't like reminding people of, is that the first few weeks of the season, it's hard to discern anything truly good from it. There's going to be sloppy games, there's going to be sloppy play, and the teams that are playing right now in September are not going to be the ones that are playing in the end of November and in December when it's gut check time for your fantasy playoffs and for their own real life playoffs. So before you make any super drastic moves with your roster, this is mostly directed towards dynasty folks. Don't blow it up after week 1. Things can still turn for you. You might be able to go and hop on the waiver wire and be able to bring in some talent, but I don't know. I had a pretty rough dynasty week too. Didn't score as many points as I thought, and you just kind of have to roll it over into the next week and hope for a little bit better. Give yourself at least a month before you start trading away your 29, 30-year-old players for draft picks.
Sound advice.
We need to be selective because there's some things that we did learn or that we verified. And I'm going to be super basic here. The Bills are really good.
Yes.
And they added a pass rusher. The Rams lost an offensive lineman, Whitworth, their left tackle, who was good. And so that's going to hurt them. But the idea that Allen Robinson is a bust and you should, sell him for pennies on the dollar. I could be wrong. We're guessing here. I don't know. But I bet Allen Robinson bounces back and puts up like 1,100 yards this season, even though he had a bad first game.
Feels like a safe bet.
Like, as another example, the 49ers and Bears game. If you didn't watch it in real time, you're like, what the hell happened here? But if you watched it on screen, you saw that they were literally playing in a monsoon. Yeah. So
everything, that whole game gets thrown out the window.
Yeah.
If you want to know more about Clark's thoughts from week 1, nerdballff.com. Clark dropped his fantasy football notes, observations, and waiver wire thoughts for week 1. And this thing is a doozy, people. It is. I didn't get the word count, but it's at least over 4,000 words of Clark's.
It's like thoughts. 11. It's like 11 Google Doc pages.
Look at this.
I finally just stopped and started editing. I was like, I have to get this out.
Hey, if you're not visiting NerdBall FF and you're listening to this podcast, we need you to do both.
Yeah,
do both. Work with all the information that you can. That's how you win.
Yeah, we can't go on. We can't talk on the show for like 5 hours, but what you can do is go read Clark's notes, and he breaks down some prime takeaways from a handful of games from week 1, and that's always good for fantasy information. We got a lot on the show. I know we already tackled love and hates, but quickly before we move on to some must starts for week 2, I want to give you guys one Dwight Schrute fact of the week, and that fact of the week is this. Among wide receivers, Donovan Peoples-Jones, top 6 in target share after week 1. Among some of the elites, Devontae Adams 1, AJ Brown 2, Cooper Kupp 3, Tyreek Hill 4, Justin Jefferson 5, and then tied for 6, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brandon Cooks, and Donovan Peoples-Jones, all with a 32.4% target share. Something saucy to look after. We have been waiting for the DPJ breakout. Maybe we're finally seeing it, maybe not, but he's certainly available on waivers. And who do the Browns play this week? They play a kind of juicy matchup, I feel like. I don't know off the top of my head.
It's the Jets. Oh. And boy, I mean, I guess if you want to know my thoughts about the Browns, you should go read my article. How is Jacoby Brissett the plan?
Yeah.
Like, how is that when Tyler Huntley exists? There's when, Case Keenum exists, gross.
For more information, nerdballff.com. All right, let's go on to week 2 must starts, baby. Let's talk about some players who we are very high on this week, who we are putting in all of our starting lineups. Jordan, why don't you start us off?
So yeah, this is more of a play this person and relieve a little bit of your panic if you started them in week 1 and you didn't get the output that you wanted. Play Rashad Penny, plug him in there. He looked really good on Monday night before, all the chaos towards the end of the game. It just makes you forget that there was actually some really good performances out of that game too. Rashad Penny, he only had 12 carries for 60 yards, but he did almost bust off a big one that got called back. And if you watch that play, he just looked so good. Like, he looked like he was about to just bust all the way down to the end zone, phrasing. But they play the 49ers this week, and the 49ers weren't exactly like world beaters against the Bears on the ground on Sunday. They let Khalil Mack have a pretty, or not Khalil Mack, Khalil Herbert. That was a
week 1
for the Bears there. Khalil Herbert, the other one that is there now, he had a pretty good day. David Montgomery didn't have like the best day, but I think if the conditions were a little bit better, I think we would have saw a lot more rushing out of the Bears, Justin Fields included, and they would have done pretty well. Right now, by rush DVOA, San Francisco is 11th. But just eye test, if you watch at a lot of their good defensive numbers just, it looks like it's inflated by the weather. Like Justin Fields wasn't creating a whole lot because it was hard to complete passes. People were fumbling the football. So I think that Rashad Penny is just a good flex to actually, I'll even start him in the RB2 spot. And I think he's going to have more and more good games, especially against a division rival. Like we've said before, division rivalry games can be nuts.
And the thing that I think you really like about it too, that another takeaway outside of just the box score, is the fact that Rashad Penny was second among running backs in backfield touches, or not backfield touches, in backfield percents, which is basically a backfield share. So the amount of attempts that the Seahawks ran to their running backs, Rashad Penny saw 92% of those, which is something when you're worried about, Kenneth Walker, I think he didn't play, was a DMP. So that helps free up that backfield. But you love seeing the fact that this running back, who is super talented, who showed us all of this, both fantasy and real football potential at the end of last year, is getting the predominant work out of the backfield for a team that likes to run the football. It's Pete Carroll's offense. So I agree with you, Jordan. I think that, again, we talked about throwing things out the window when it comes to that week 1 game for the 49ers. But their run defense, on Patty's NEF rankings, they ranked, I think, like 16th in run defense, which is like middle of the pack. So they're not special, right? That's not where their defense lies in the special. It's that pass rush, getting after opposing quarterbacks and really shutting down the passing game. So I like Rashad Penny. We talked about him on earlier shows being just like a pretty locked in surefire RB2 for this season, as long as he has that starting gig in Seattle locked down.
Yeah, a lot of the fantasy game is guessing, but one of the best ways to guess is when we have a really clear picture of volume at running back. We just need to not worry about it. I mean, no one's going to supplant Rashad Penny, at least early. I mean, this coaching staff is as old school as it comes. I'm really excited about Kenneth Walker long term, but I'm not worried about him eating into touches. And another situation where we know volume is going to be there, and so my must start for this week is Curtis Samuel. So the Commanders were scheming the ball to him. Like, he was clearly an incredibly important part of that offense. He played in the backfield. He had, all those good manufactured touches and looked extremely quick. He looked like Curtis Samuel of like 3 or 4 years ago. So he looked awesome. That is not fool's gold. That is going to be a PPR win for you if you picked him up, or if he's still, dangling on your waiver wire. Like, you should go get him. He's going to be a nice wide receiver 3/flex in those PPR leagues.
Yeah, that's all right. So I'll be honest. I write, it's coming out either tonight or tomorrow, is my roast and ghost, basically fantasy football starts and sits article. And I've added something this year in which I go game by game and I give one player who's a roast, one player who's a ghost, and then one player who's a coast, who's just kind of a casual start, your basic trusting start. And I had Curtis Samuel as a ghost, given just how Detroit was able to defend the slot in their week 1 game. That being said, Clark, you're totally right. And I think this is something that I overlooked in looking at that, is that it was not just that they were looking, that he saw 11 targets and that Carson Wentz was looking his way a lot. It's that they were manufacturing touches for him out of the backfield, which is something we saw in Carolina. And if you play in a half-point PPR or a full-point PPR, like that kind of usage is, you absolutely love to see it. And so maybe I switch someone else into my ghost for this week for the Washington Detroit game, because you might be right, Clark. Curtis Samuel feels like a guy whom we've been waiting to see healthy in this Washington offense, and they've been waiting to be healthy to put into this Washington offense. And now that it's finally happening, they're going to give him the full workload that they've been planning for him, and he could be the fantasy darling that many people expected him to be when he left Carolina.
Yeah. Everybody, and like all 3 of the main starting wide receivers in Washington ate on Sunday.
Good.
Like, Jahan Dotson had like 3 catches, 2 of them were touchdowns. Like, Terry McLaurin was still Terry McLaurin, and Curtis Samuel was probably the most impressive, because when I saw him in that game, he looked like he was more comfortable doing the things that they were asking to do, or they were asking him to do last year. And yeah, I just don't think it like worked as well. And it might be, I mean, we make fun of Carson Wentz a lot. Like, he's a little hectic and he's a little crazy. And we often remember him for like one really, really bad play per game. but every now and then he kind of just balls out. And like, this was definitely one of those games where he just balled out. And that might happen a few more times. I definitely think that like at least Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin, I'm not sure about Jahan Dotson because like rookie scoring can be a little volatile, but I think like those two especially, they're going to have a pretty interesting like target share and percentage of the offense that McLaurin and Samuel until at least Brian Robinson's back. Like they the running game is probably going to change a little bit when he's there, but still I like them throwing the ball over the field.
Yeah, and we can do a little editorial meeting on air here, Pete, or I can just float some ideas to you.
Hit me.
Jordan, like Carson Wentz isn't like an absolute dumpster fire as a quarterback. Like he makes some really good plays and he makes some really bonehead plays. And this week he played the Jaguars. So we saw good Carson Wentz against an incredibly terrible team. And I'm with you on Dotson, like dynasty long term. This is great because Dotson didn't just make a couple of catches. He made a couple of really tough catches. And I mean, good players sometimes don't make plays, but when you see a rookie come in and you only get a couple of shots and you pay off all of them, that's awesome. Having said that, the ghost this week is Carson Wentz, and Dotson is an awesome player that I'm excited about, but boy, that is a risky flex play, counting on that 2 TD upside on such few targets. Here's the Jaguars too. They're not good.
I like, you know what, Clark? I like the Jahan Dotson call for a ghost because you can get roped into that rookie fever, and when you're seeing the 2 touchdowns is delightful and it's going to inflate his fantasy production, but that is 5 targets, 3 catches, 40 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's a hyper efficient stat line which you would need to continue in an offense. If Carson Wentz is really going to, if this is the Carson Wentz, or to say another way, this is the Carson Wentz he needs, what we saw is what he needs to be in order to like keep Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Antonio Gibson, and Jahan Dotson, and maybe even some Logan Thomas, all fantasy viable and relevant. And do we have faith in Carson Wentz being able to do that? Who's to say? Not me. Yeah.
I cautioned against like confirming your priors in week 1, like super hardcore priors. But I was a little mad that I didn't invest a little bit more in Jahan Dotson in my dynasty. Like he was running some good routes and like
he looked
scoring
legit.
Touchdowns, catching difficult passes. That's how you get your quarterback's trust.
Yep, that's how you do
it out there.
Yeah, you know how you don't get your quarterback's trust, Jordan? Dropping a gorgeous 75-yard touchdown. It goes right through your hands.
That was
hey, you know what? I have an excuse for that. I don't want to sound like a homer, but this is a kid who didn't play like all of preseason, and he's in his first NFL game.
It's fair
with a notoriously finicky quarterback throwing him the football in a hostile Minnesota Vikings stadium.
I mean, the route was clean.
Blame him for like short arming it.
The route was clean. He got Patrick Peterson turned around in an instant and was wide open and just.
To peel back the onion curtain for those who might have missed the Packers-Vikings game, Rodgers absolutely dropped a dime right in between Christian Watson's hands and did not seem pleased. I mean, I think people make too much out of Aaron Rodgers' reactions to stuff. It's like only Eli Manning had the stone face to like just stone face through that. Eli Manning's face was always the same, but at other quarterbacks, you're like, we're struggling. We don't know what we're going to do. You're open. I put it in the perfect spot and you dropped it.
Yeah.
I don't think that his reaction was like, it was too bad. It's like, well, dang.
Speaking of Eli Manning, I saw like the greatest like tweet anecdote of Eli Manning today. I'm not sure if you guys saw that. It was in reference to Saquon Barkley. Danny Heifetz tweeted this yesterday, actually. He said, Eli Manning telling a story about him and Saquon Barkley. Eli told him to run one route. Saquon thought he should run another. Eli responds, if I tell you tomorrow's Easter, go paint some eggs.
Damn.
Which is great. That is
Damn,
great.
Eli.
Love a quarterback that's like, hey, if I tell you to do something, you damn well do it.
And that must have been, I mean, what, Eli's like 12th season in Saquon's rookie year. It's like, look, bro, I just need you to listen to what I'm telling you.
Just do We're gonna for our non-existing merchandise team, we're gonna get t-shirts that say "Go paint some eggs." I feel like that's a good phrase. It's a good phrase that I want to use. Well, speaking of the Packers, my must start this week is facing the Green Bay Packers, and it's Darnell Mooney for the Chicago Bears. We spent all offseason hyping him up as the Bears' clear number one wide receiver, and that's still the case. Again, throwaway week one, in which he only saw 5 targets because they were in a monsoon, and or he only saw 3 targets. Excuse me. We don't take the monsoon into consideration. What we do take into consideration is that Justin Jefferson absolutely tore apart the Packers secondary and did that predominantly out of the slot. The Packers gave up 35.9 fantasy points to wide receivers playing out of the slot, and that is thanks to the edge, or the what is it? The 33rd team's new edge stats calculator, which if you are a fantasy football head, you should go check that out because it's a pretty amazing stat. Darnell Mooney ran over 50% of his routes from the slot in week one, and I think that's where he's going to be utilized, unless the Packers decide to just have Jair Alexander shade Mooney all over the field, which I don't think that's going to happen. Jordan, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But it seems like their defense is vulnerable to slot receivers. And I think Darnell Mooney and Justin Fields are going to get on the same page, and we're going to see a big game out of him this week against the Packers in a division matchup.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, Mooney he's not on the level of, Devontae Adams or these like top echelon guys, but he's very good. And Jordan and you nailed this, Pete. That game was weather impacted, so I'm not taking a ton away from that game. Mooney missed 4 offensive snaps, so it's not like he's not getting on the field or anything. Right. He should be fine to bounce back.
Yeah, the only thing I can say, like, to provide a little bit of analysis here is almost completely anecdotal for the Packers, and that's at halftime, like Matt LaFleur, they were talking about it on the broadcast too. They really were challenging not just the offense, but especially the defense in that game to just like be tougher and so like lock up these communication issues that they were having. It was like because it was honestly, it's a little bit hard to discern if Justin Jefferson was having a good game or how much of that was actually the Packers just completely because the dude was open by like 12 feet
miles
on every play. That's like even on the worst defense in the league, that generally doesn't happen. So like there were some clear communication issues, and they might just tighten some things up by next week, which I would hope, I would expect. Otherwise, shit, they're in some damn trouble.
I want to quickly
do some coaching this week, maybe.
I want to see if Next Gen has average yards of separation for.
I'll tell you one thing: Justin Jefferson did pretty much all of his damage in the first half. Granted, a lot of that was game script, but I'm a little worried why the game script tilted so heavily towards the run for the Vikings when the Packers didn't look like they were going away until like late in the fourth, at least.
Just keep feeding those wide receivers. Why are we stopping?
You'd expect Dalvin Cook to have a better game. I expect Dalvin Cook to have a better game this week.
Dalvin Cook's going to have a good game this week because they're playing. He's my roast for that game, and I just put it away as to whom they're playing. But they're playing someone who has a bad run defense.
Yeah, and that's something to keep an eye on in week one. Is we know Dalvin Cook is good, and we know the Vikings were kind of
the Eagles
doing what they kind of scoring at will. We expected this Packers defense to be very good. Maybe we just saw that against the run they were good, and they need to sort out the secondary. So we'll keep an eye on that moving forward.
All right, before we play the Eagles, Pete.
Yeah, they play the Eagles, who DeAndre Swift was having all kinds of work against.
That might be the game of the week.
That's a
track meet for fantasy purposes, I think. Holy cow.
Is that a week 2 schedule? Also, I know we talked about this last week, but let's also give another round of applause to, I know week 1's Thursday night game ultimately became a blowout, but let's give another round of applause to the NFL for putting the Chargers and Chiefs as this week's Thursday night game. Please and thank you. Also, Vikings Eagles is the Monday night game. Wow. NFL, you're doing well so far with these primetime games.
And the ESPN broadcast is no longer completely unwatchable.
Which is a bummer because
good.
you have to pick between Troy Buck and Troy Buck. You got to pick between Troy Buck and the Manning Bros.
I totally forgot about the Manning cast. I'm disappointed. I will have that broadcast is so much better than
it is.
Network broadcast.
Yeah. Packers Bears Sunday Night Football. Jordan is so excited.
I'd rather watch Vikings Bears, or not Vikings Bears, Vikings Eagles.
Yeah,
mostly because I don't find the Bears that interesting of a team this year. But
said like a true fan. Let's
the Lions.
Before we go, it's time for top 10, which Clark has hijacked to a top 5, which is reasonable because we don't want to take up too much of our time. Top 5 unanswered questions from week 1. Clark, what do you got? Rank them. Give me number 5.
So the number 5, just Trey Lance. A lot of questions surrounding this coming into the year. He was going as like
you
quarterback.
Have to say it like a question. Trey Lance?
Is Trey Lance the answer for the Niners? Question mark.
Perfect. That's how it's done.
Yeah, the weather in this one was really bad. A tale of two halves for Trey Lance. Like things looked pretty good, and he was getting kind of sabotaged. Couple of fumbles in this one, and then of course he threw a very bad interception that let the Bears get back into this. I don't think that we saw enough to speak very definitively about it, and we probably won't know until like 3 years from now. But I don't know. What did y'all think about what we saw from Lance in the monsoon?
I think the thing is that we've decided you throw that game out. But it's something the 49ers are going to have to Dak Prescott gone for the Cowboys for an extended period of time. If the Cowboys want to stay in contention in the NFC in terms of playoff seeding, I mean, do they trade for Jimmy G? And if you're the 49ers, if you're trading Jimmy G, then you're like fully committed to the Trey Lance bandwagon, which I think they should be. I think that you put all your cards into a young quarterback and you just fall as the chips may, but I am not an NFL coach. So that is probably why I did not. I mean, I think again, I have Trey Lance in my home league as my QB1 and was let down, but I'm giving him week 2 to show me what he really has. And I'll judge him from then.
Yeah, I think for both quarterbacks in that game, Fields and Lance, like you really are looking at like weeks 2, 3 to see more signs for what they can potentially be. I don't think that the 49ers really have an issue with Trey Lance. I thought he actually looked pretty good despite the rain and just the interior offensive line absolutely caving in on certain plays. Like that's the real problem for the 49ers. It's like they don't seem like they have a very good unit coalescing in front of him yet. And I still like Trey Lance. I think that the real issue is not going to be his play. It's going to be that like he has Jimmy G, like locker room hero Jimmy G, like holding his clipboard right behind them. So if like something even goes like a little bit wrong, like the alarm bells start going off. We've heard this a few times from different people say like that's why the Patriots got rid of Cam Newton last year, is because people love that guy, but they need the spotlight to be on Mac Jones. It happens.
It does. Mac Jones with back issues. Don't love to hear that. Number 4.
Back Jones.
Back Jones. Pat Patricia called a great offensive game. Let the record show.
Number 4. Is Jameis Winston good? I don't know. So when Winston played for the Buccaneers so long ago, he spent the first 3 quarters setting his team on fire, and then the fourth quarter miraculously putting out the fire and coming back. So he's corrected the throwing 4 horrible interceptions at the beginning of the game part, which resulted in incredibly boring play out of New Orleans. And then in the fourth quarter, they start sending the receivers deep, and apparently Jameis Winston's still good at playing football like that. They come charging back and defeat the Falcons in absolutely heartbreaking fashion. So do y'all believe in Jameis Winston for the rest of the year?
I 100% believe in Jameis Winston. I'm fully aboard the Jameis Winston experience. I think what my hope is that what we saw week 1 is kind of the template for how the Saints want to approach this game, which is basically like, we are going to minimize as many mistakes as possible. We're going to let our route runners and Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry get open, and we're going to just like very conservative. We're going to rely on our defense, and we're just going to slowly move the ball. And then if we ever get down, everyone run 4 verts, and we're just going to have Jameis rip it, and we're going to see what happens. Because either we're down, and if he throws a bunch of picks, we're out of the game anyways, or he does what he did against the Falcons, and that's an experience that I can 100% get behind. And I think that Jameis Winston, for as goofy as he is off camera, like, on the field and behind, off the field, and for the trouble that he has gotten into, which shouldn't be discredited, he threw for 5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns like just a few years ago. And I feel like people are just like, is he good? Yes, that came with 33 interceptions, but that's an NFL record. And he's a record setter, you guys. It's important.
Yeah, I have, and I'm doing this on the fly. I'm trying to look at my dynasty rankings. So obviously there are some rookies just in there ruining this for me, but I have him as like the 17th or 18th best quarterback. He's kind of like, for me, in this like Derek Carr, like Matthew Stafford range of quarterbacks. Like, he's not in the upper echelon, but he's good enough to at least win you a Super Bowl if you get there. Like, yeah. I truly believe that Jameis Winston, with like the pieces around him and the defense, and if everything else is right, he's a good enough quarterback to get you there and to win. You're not going to win the Super Bowl because of him, but you're not going to lose it because of him either. Well, you might, but very specifically on one of those great Jameis interceptions. I'm just saying, it's like, he's not a quarterback where you have, I don't know, you're trotting out Jared Goff
or freaking
for the Detroit Lions. Like, if Jameis Winston was on the Detroit Lions, that's a good football team.
Oh, if Jameis was on the Lions, I would be. Can you imagine how hyped you would be about the Lions wide receivers if Jameis Winston was on that team? DJ Chark and Amon-Ra St. Brown, and they'd just be like instant wide receiver. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown is a wide receiver one, but anyways. And they have, who's the rookie that they have? Oh, but he's out. Williams.
Jameson.
Yeah, Jameson Williams. Number 3, Clark.
Okay, yeah. Don't get sidetracked with the Lions, Clark. Stay on task. Are we ever going to get an answer about the Patriots backfield? Ty Montgomery, of course, gets the lone touchdown and has been moved to IR. I think the snap count, or not, I think the snap count was Damian Harris 22 snaps, Ty Montgomery 20 snaps, Ramondre Stevenson 14. What? Pete, are we ever going to get an answer?
It kills me because I was so aboard the Ramondre Stevenson hype train this year, and I'm not letting week 1 dissolve it. I'm staying true to my guns, especially with Ty Montgomery, especially Belichick pulling the most classic Patriots thing in the wide world, which is like the running back who does well then gets put on IR and is done for 4 weeks. With Ty Montgomery gone, I'm hoping that Ramondre Stevenson kind of re-solidifies himself as a pass catching back, which this is a really good matchup for that, because the Steelers got absolutely torched by Joe Mixon, both on the ground and through the air in week 1. And if either of these running backs can like grab a hold of that, they're really good starts for week 2. But it's one of those things where like, I have to wait and see it before I'm going to make a move on it. I was so excited for Ramondre Stevenson, for finally there to be like a clear RB1 in New England, but Bill Belichick, as always, doesn't care about your fantasy team. And Pat Matricia can't call play to save his life. So God forbid we put any faith into the Patriots offense.
Look, I think Damian Harris is a good running back, and I think Bill Belichick loves himself some Bama players. Even if he'll mess up sometimes, true, but I don't think that necessarily means that it's like going right to the next guy, because I think everybody has a job to do, as they say in New England, and I don't think it's necessarily just next man up to fill Damian Harris's shoes or to fill Ty Montgomery's shoes for that matter. Like Ty Montgomery is a very specific player. I think this backfield is much more like, I think you could play Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. Just there's enough football to go around for 2 backs. 3 backs, it's a little murky. I mean, one of the better dynasty trades I made this year was just Damian Harris for Miles Sanders straight up. And I say it was one of the better ones because I know what I have with Miles Sanders. I don't have to guess week in and week out which Patriots running back is going to score me points.
It's fair. I think I do agree with you, Jordan. I do agree that removing Ty Montgomery from the equation makes me feel much more comfortable about this backfield because 2 backs can eat, 3 backs is 2 backs can eat and 3 backs can meet in a, I don't know. I thought there was like
3 backs is still hungry.
Perfect. Oh, Jordan, well done.
And this is, don't want to overreact to week 1. The Patriots offense is on watch. All offseason, all we have heard is how awful they looked. And Miami had a lot of things bounce their way and still didn't absolutely put away the Patriots. But boy, that from the scheme to the deployments,
why did we make a whole new scheme?
Didn't look good.
Why? Number two.
Did we learn anything about the Kansas City wide receiver rotation?
Yes. Juju Smith-Schuster is number 1, and it is glorious.
I didn't know.
I was going to say Travis Kelce is still good.
Travis Kelce is wide receiver 1, 2, and 3.
I think that Juju Smith-Schuster is probably the best receiver option on this team, but I think any of the next 2 to 3 guys are like deep streaming options because Patrick Mahomes looks like week 1 caveat. I'm going to say it a million times this podcast. I'm sorry. But week 1 Mahomes looked like he was from outer space. Like dude looked like he was on one.
Yeah, he was coming. He was pissed off that Rodgers has won back-to-back MVPs, and he's like, "It's my turn now."
People were putting Justin Herbert in the Hall of Fame this summer. Josh Allen's already there. Patrick Mahomes is like, "Hang on, hold my Kansas City barbecue."
Not on my watch.
The very, very tiny buy low-ish on Pat Mahomes window has vanished. Right, like he was going like God. He was going like 3rd, 4th in a lot of. That's not going to happen anymore. Yeah, 10 players were targeted by Patrick Mahomes. 9 of them caught passes. Juju had the most wide receiver catches and was deployed in those easy throws that we know Juju can run and perform on. So he had a good day. No touchdown, 79 yards on 6 catches. So I do think we've got some answers in Kansas City. The biggest unanswered question. This is
number 1.
If you want to talk about your team, you should start your own podcast. And so I'm talking about what the F is going on with Kadarius Toney. I demand answers.
He's my wide receiver ghost of the week because you just can't start him until you see something from him reliably, and it's not his fault. This is Ian Hartitz tweeted this out, and it's the video of him getting a direct snap or a wide receiver.
Yeah, it's like an end around wide receiver,
and he just
pass play.
Makes 15 people miss, gains effortlessly 40 yards, and then he played 5 snaps after that, and it's just like we're done. I've seen Toney talk about it. I've seen Dable talk about it. It seems like they're petitioning or positioning it as like recovering from injury, still getting to know the offense, whatever it might be. I don't know. I don't like it. It has shades of Kyle Shanahan and Brandon Ayuk last year, where they just were, for whatever reason, he just refused to play him. So I hate it, but if you have Kadarius Toney on your team, I think you have to keep him on your bench until you see. It doesn't need to be a big fantasy game from him. It just needs to be like, see him play 70% of the snaps. See him on the field more than just like 10 times in a game before we can be like, okay, now let's put him as confidently as your like wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 2.
I'm gonna connect some dots, and this might be like an extreme
Detective
stretch,
Jordan.
but the what you said when who said that he might not know the playbook or he's behind on it? Was that like a quote, or were you just guessing?
I thought you pontificate. I thought it was. Oh God, I'm trying to remember where I got it
from. That's being bantied about because
yeah,
staff writer Nick Bottaford of NerdBall fame and I were chatting about this, and that he brought that up too. I don't know who said it, but this is a storied. Kadarius' short career has been quite storied on the attitudinal front.
Yes. And it makes sense. He was gone for most of the preseason and most of the offseason dealing with injury, and it's a whole new offense getting put in. So, like, I think the reason why it's getting batted around is because it has reasonable legs to it, possibly.
Yeah. What I was gonna say to add to it is, like, I was actually really down on Toney during the draft process last year, not because of any sort of athleticism abilities, but it was because he was a senior at Florida, and I'd actually had heard that he still didn't really have a full grasp on the playbook. I don't know if that was because I'm not a Miami Hurricanes like historian, so I'm not sure if they like had a new coach or a new OC come in and like install a new offense in his senior year, and it took him like the full season to really get a handle on him. Maybe there was like some COVID learning issues with that, but I don't know. Maybe Kadarius Toney just needs some time to like really pick up and memorize the playbook. And if he's not getting the reps with injuries, like I can see him like falling behind. I don't think it's necessarily well, at least I hope it's not a Kadarius Toney like behavior issue. I know there was some like light chatter of trading him in the offseason.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if
came out of nowhere, it felt like.
Yeah, it seems like it could be any number of things, and we won't really know until we hear it directly from the horse's mouth.
Maybe the Giants just need to put a clause in his contract saying that he needs to do 4 hours of film study.
Yeah. I love baseless speculation, and we're nearing the end of the podcast, so I'm going to let this one rip. There was some attitude problem reports, and when you hear reports like that, there's someone on the team who tells a reporter, I would like you to include this in a story because I want to like set this tone. These aren't like accident conversations of like some offensive coordinator was having coffee and like accidentally let this slip. So last year, Tony's got an attitude problem. He's got, ankle injury, all of this stuff. I wouldn't blame anyone who quit on Joe Judge last year. Like, that's a reasonable human being response, is like, you are obviously a dumpster fire head coach who has no idea what they're doing. How are you going to tell me what I'm supposed to do? That makes sense. That's probably not the best way to go about interacting at your workplace, but it at least scans. And so I also think that Toney might have had one of those injuries where like, boy, the preseason's over. Oh, my leg feels better. Okay, great. I don't have to go out there in games that don't mean anything. And I think that pissed off Brian Daboll. And I think that we saw that here in the 7-snap performance from Toney. I wonder if Daboll is trying to assert his dominance in this team, and if Toney is going to allow that to happen. I could be totally wrong. Maybe he was hurt, and maybe they're just easing him into play. But there seems to be a lot of back and forth with this story. And 7 snaps, 2 carries. You watch both of those carries, and you think, well, this guy's a superstar. This guy's amazing.
Yeah.
Why isn't he getting the ball? It just makes you wonder why he's not getting it if he looks so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the good news is, though, that I think just describing that Toney's skill and like what he can do for this team on any one play is going to like overcome any sort of the misgivings that Brian Daboll might have, especially if you want to win in New York. Like, there's not very many options if you don't. So
maybe this is the one slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
And
now we're back.
We're good to go.
We're back to like 80% of the snaps.
What a fun game. So the Giants, if you didn't get to see the game, the Giants score to go down by 1 with, like a minute or so left in the game. And Brian Daboll must have to get his pants
Big balls Daboll.
Yeah, because he decides to go for 2, he gets it, and then the Titans drive down the field and miss a really, really long field goal. So an exciting beginning to both the Mike McDaniel and the Brian Daboll eras here in week 1.
Both getting new tailors this week, apparently.
That's
according to their own players.
Got to get the crotch refitted. Yes, well, and it should delight everyone to know that Joe Judge is co-offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots, along with Pat Patricia. So we're doing great here in New England, everybody. We're doing great. That's all we got for you this week. Make sure you rate and subscribe to the podcast and your podcast platform of choice, and go follow us on Twitter at NerdBallFF. You can follow myself at Twitter at Pete M. Rogers. Follow Clark at NFL Clark, and Jordan at Jordan_Smith27. And of course, we said it at the top of the show. We're going to say it again here. Make sure you're going to check out all the amazing content that we're putting out over on the site, nerdballff.com. I've got starts and sits coming out tomorrow. Clark's got his week 1 thoughts out today. Jordan's going to be dropping his 2023 rookie rankings, because you can never be too early in rookie rankings, especially for those dynasty leagues. Always got to be looking ahead. Make sure you do all of that. Make sure you check it all out. And until next week, my fellow nerds,